I didn't start reading thrillers until this year, so I didn't think I would have enough books that I read to do this tag, but surprisingly enough, I read a lot of thrillers this year and I'm excited to talk about them. Hey y'all, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Alicia, and today I'll be doing the Thrilling Thriller book tag. Riveting Reads did tag me on this tag, so I'll go ahead and link her channel down below, as well as the original tag. I'm really excited because I love doing book tags, so without any further ado, let's get right into it. The last thriller that we bought is Rosemary's Baby by Ariel Levine. This is a really old book. It was first published in the 1960s, late 1960s. But in this, we follow our main character, Rosemary Woodhouse, when her and her husband move into this new apartment building that is mainly populated by elderly folks. She notices that while they live there, the couple next door is being a little eccentric and there's weird noises coming from that apartment. Eventually, her husband does befriend the neighbors and they start to spend a lot of time together. And eventually, when Rosemary becomes pregnant, the couple next door begins to take too much interest in her well-being and her baby's well-being. I haven't read this, but I'm excited to read it just because it's so old and I don't hear anybody talking about it. We'll see how I like it. The most recent thriller that I've added to my TBR is Pieces of Her by Karen Slaughter. This was a birthday gift from my brother Brandon, so thank you Brandon so much for getting me this. I ended up reading Pretty Girls earlier this year and I absolutely loved it, so he did get me this one. I don't know too much about it, and that might be a trend for any of the books that I haven't read in this video, so just a heads up. I personally don't like knowing too much going into a book, specifically thrillers, just because I know that the less you know, the better, and it's all about the experience. So the only thing that I really know about this is that we have our main character, Andrea, and she loves her mom, but then she starts to figure out that her mom is not who she said she is, and she starts to uncover secrets about her. And that's really all I know, but I loved Pretty Girls, so I'm really excited to get to this whenever I do. A thriller that I had really high expectations for is The Childfinder by Renee Denville. I was really excited for this thriller because it is set in the Pacific Northwest and that's where I live. So I thought it would be really cool for a story to be set here because I would be able to visualize the atmosphere and I just thought it would be really nice. But I actually ended up DNFing it. I didn't make it all the way through. And I was completely disappointed because I really wanted to love this book. I think the real problem that I had with this is that the author tried to make every single point in here a moment. Like everything stood out, everything was supposed to be hard-hitting, and it didn't flow well together. It was just poorly written in my opinion, and I had to DNF it. But if you're interested in picking this up, this book is about a private investigator who is going out into the forest to find a missing girl named Madison. A couple of years back, Madison was lost as she went out with her family to pick a Christmas tree and she never came back. Our private investigator has some traumas of her own that she has to go through. When she was younger, she actually came out of the forest herself and she doesn't know who her family is. And throughout this story, we're following her attempt to find Madison, but also her attempt to find more about herself and her past. So I just thought that was going to be super cool and super intriguing, but unfortunately, it didn't end up vibing with me and I had to put it down. Ooh, what tropes do I love and hate in thrillers? I don't think there's any specific trope that I hate thus far, just because I'm not well versed in thrillers yet. But some tropes that I'm not gravitating towards are political thrillers. Oh, and I also don't think I ever want to read a trope where it's like trouble in paradise, like, you know, when a couple or a family goes on vacation and something ends up happening, something bad happens. I love traveling and I love visiting new places, and I don't want to have this constant fear of going somewhere and feeling like it's going to be a slasher movie or like something bad is going to happen. So I don't think I would ever pick up one of those. But tropes that I love psychological thrillers. They are my jam. I also really like unreliable narrators. So if you have any recommendations for me of books that are either psychological thrillers or have unreliable narrators, let me know down below because I'll pick it up. An underrated thriller that I read this past year is The Sherlockian by Graham Moore. This is a mystery thriller, and this is actually the book that got me back into reading this year, like consistently. In the past years, I would read and pick up a book and put it down, but the book that got me back into reading every single month was this book right here. It was so fast-paced, it was so intriguing, there was a mystery, and I loved every second of it. This is a book that I can see myself coming back to if I'm ever in a reading slump, just to get back into the groove of things. The Sherlockian is set in London, and we follow two separate timelines. Now, I personally haven't read any Sherlock Holmes stories, sorry. But this is, if you are a Sherlock Holmes fan, I actually think you'll really enjoy this. We follow a dual perspective back in the 1800s where Arthur Conan Doyle just killed off Sherlock Holmes, and he's going and trying to solve a mystery on his own. In the second timeline, we follow Harold, who is a Sherlock Holmes enthusiast, and he just got elected into this very prestigious secret society of Sherlock Holmes fans. These fans have recently discovered that there is a diary of Arthur Conan Doyle that went missing in the past, and they think that it has just resurfaced. The story really takes off when someone from this club is murdered, and Harold thinks that it has to do with the diary. And so after this, Harold goes on a hunt to find out who the murderer is and to find that secret diary. We do alternate between past and present, and I just thought that was great. I love books that alternate between past and present or have two points of views. So if you like that, I highly recommend this one. It's really fast-paced and easy to get into. This next question was supposed to be pick three thrillers? That's really difficult to say, 3 thrillers. So this next question was supposed to be pick 3 thrillers, 2 that you've read and 1 that you haven't read, and have you guess down below which ones I have read and which one I haven't read. I feel like that's too easy, so I'm gonna make it a little bit harder. So I'm going to show you a book that I've read and loved, a book that I've read but didn't like, and a book that I've DNF'd. So the first one of those is going to be Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. Let's see, the second one will be A Stranger in the House by Sherry Lapina. And the third one is The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. So go ahead and guess down below which one I read and loved, which one I read and disliked, and which one I DNF'd. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I consider myself a thriller beginner as well, even though I've read quite a few this year, but I'm not as well versed or well read as really big thriller fans. But a book that I just keep thinking about, and I just loved how easily I got into it and how fast-paced it was. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time and I could not put it down. It was really late at night, but I just had to figure out what happened. And that book for me was The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I adored this book. It was so great, so fast-paced, and it just had me on the edge of my seat the entire time. It was fantastic. So in The Silent Patient, we follow a psychotherapist named Theo Faber who's obsessed with getting a patient to talk. This patient is named Alicia, and years prior, she killed her husband and shot him in the face 3 times. Ever since then, she's never said a word. And Theo, as his very gifted mind, wants to figure out what happened. He thinks that he can crack Alicia and solve the mystery once and for all. Super great. If you're a beginner to thrillers, I highly recommend this one. It's so good. But if you're a person who doesn't really like to be scared and you don't really like those elements of thrillers where you're like at the edge of your seat and you're like, whoa, I'm home alone and I'm kind of scared, then actually I would recommend the Sherlockian, because even though it is a thriller, it's more of a mystery thriller. So you won't necessarily be scared, you'll just be engaged the entire time through. So either or, you can't go wrong. The Silent Patient or the Sherlockian. I think these are both great reads. Dang, this is tough. My all-time favorite thriller. A few months ago, it would have been Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. This book is so good, but it's so dark. It's not for the faint of heart, and it's not for people that hate body horror and violence. Before you decide to pick this up, please look into trigger warnings, because there are so many. Excuse my language, but this book is fucked up. Like, bad things happen in this book and it's wild. But I love it. It's wow. It like broke me when I read it. In Pretty Girls, we follow two estranged sisters, Claire and Lydia. When they were younger, their younger sister, Julia, went missing, and it was something that caused a rift between them, and they haven't spoken since. Julia's disappearance was never solved. 20 years later, we follow Claire and Julia as they're adults and they're navigating their own separate lives. Around this time, there's been another disappearance of a teenage girl that looks very much like Julia, and the disappearance details are almost exactly alike. During this time, Claire's husband also gets murdered, and this just sets off a chain of events that is wild. That's all I can say about this book. Thrillers require you to know as little as possible, so I don't want to spoil anything ever for you. But if you're okay with violence in your books and with body horror, this is a great one. But another book that I recently read that I love and I still think about is a psychological thriller, and it's called I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. This one is a weird book. I like reading weird books. If you're on my channel, I think you might know that by now. This is a weird one. It's a psychological thriller and it had me at the edge of my seat, but it was weird. The ending, you're either gonna love it or you're gonna hate it. The one thing I do want to say about this book, that this is about the journey and not about the end. I recommend you actually read this in one sitting. You can totally do it if you just take 2 to 3 hours out of your day. It's super small and super thin, but I think you'll get the most out of it. Ian Reid does a wonderful job at building subtle tension that really seeps into your bones, and it's trippy. The overall synopsis of this is we're following a couple as they're making their way to the dude's family's home. During the car ride there, the girl is thinking of ending things with her partner. That's as much as I'm going to say about this book, because it's about the experience of reading this book. Some things that people might not like about it is that it's very conversation driven. The entire about 3/4 of this book were in a car ride and they're talking about their relationship and how they met. And yeah, I think it's also a smart book. So if you like smart books, I also recommend this one. So these are my 2 favorite thrillers so far. I'm sure that will change with time as I read more, but so far, these right here get me going. The last question is just for me to tag other people to do this tag. So if you want to do this tag, please go ahead and do it. I want to find more thrillers and I'll be watching your videos. But more specifically, I'd like to tag Uptown Horror Reviews, Pick My Puff Reads, Bonbon Reads, and Read by Andy. I will have all of their channels linked down below. They're all extremely great YouTubers and they're some of my favorites, so go ahead and check them out. But thank you so much for watching. Let me know down below what your favorite thriller is, because I would love to check it out. I'm always looking for thriller recommendations. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'm very grateful for all of you that stopped by here on this channel. With the holidays coming up, please stay safe and healthy, and I will see you on the next time. Bye!